This is part two of our discussion of physiological differences between men and women, and it's quite a short lecture. It just answers the one question: why do we express values this way? Why do we express the VO2 max values this way or another way? Remember, we had liters per minute, mLs per kg per minute. When do we choose to report values this way, or when is it important for an athlete to have a high value in liters per minute versus a high value in mLs per kg per minute? Liters per minute is simply how much oxygen can your body use each minute to produce ATP aerobically. So this is the size of your aerobic engine. And I've just repeated for you some of the information from the previous lecture. Differences between elite men and women are huge. And the reason for the big difference is the difference in size. Men being larger have a larger heart to pump blood, a greater stroke volume, and they have more muscle mass to use the oxygen. And women have a lower hemoglobin concentration, so this again favors the men who are able to deliver more oxygen. So when would it be important to express values this way? And the answer is when the person's job or the work that they are doing is against an external object or an external resistance. Example would be hay baling. You just want a person who's got a large engine to be able to move these hay bales all day long. Now, it may be easiest to appreciate the importance of liters per minute, the absolute size of your aerobic engine, if you think also about the other possibility, mLs per kg per minute, when you express the size of your aerobic engine relative to the size of your body. Now, you could look around, and if you see a large man who's not particularly fit, you might say, man, he's got a Cadillac engine. Of course, it may be in a Sherman tank body. Whereas you might look at a smaller person, and since we're talking about men versus women, you might look at a woman and say, wow, she's pretty small, so she has a pretty small aerobic engine. But pound for pound, on a per kilogram basis, she may have a higher relative VO2 max. Expressed on a per kilogram basis, her value may be higher than the man's. So now we're looking at when would it be advantageous to have a large liters per minute? In what kind of activity would this man have an advantage? And certainly in the sport of aerobic hay baling, the man has an advantage. The picture on the upper right shows a task where, for the most part, the work rate is unrelated to the person's mass. What you see there, believe it or not, is a small person sitting in a rowboat, okay? So you have a small person sitting in a rowboat. Where does the resistance come from as the person rows in the regatta? Okay, the resistance comes from the interface between the boat and the water. All right, so here's our little woman, and she sits in the boat and it bobs on top of the water, and she says, I want to be on your rowing team. Below that, you see this big man who sits in the boat. Now he's big and strong, and he's got this large aerobic engine. But you say, because he weighs more, the boat is going to be lower in the water and there's going to be more resistance. Well, if you look, you can see that yes, the boat is riding a little lower in the water, but if his engine is 3 times as big as hers, his weight is only increasing the resistance 10 or 20%. So the answer to the question, who do you want to row your boat? That big guy. And if you think about maybe every 4 years in the Olympics, there's nothing else on, so you watch the rowing. If you look at those rowers, they are monsters. They are huge, huge people because their weight isn't held against them because it doesn't cause much more resistance. So what you're looking for in a rowing team is just these huge, big people. It's not quite so true, but it also kind of holds for bicycle racing. In bicycle racing, your weight isn't what causes the resistance. It's the air resistance. And the air resistance isn't a function of your body weight. It's a function of your frontal area. So people who are cycling on the flat, time trialers, they are these big guys who have a big engine, and it would be similar to comparing the man and the woman in this picture. Yes, the man is twice as big, but his frontal area may only be 20% greater. So he's got an engine that's twice as big, only 20% more resistance to overcome. Your time trialer on the bike is going to be a big person. So those are the kinds of activities where you would say, I want to measure the VO2 max in liters per minute. Something unrelated to exercise per se is when you say, I am just interested in the engine. If you are training somebody, you just want to do something to increase the size of the engine. Body weight, body size is not part of the question here. If you're evaluating a drug, then you want to see how it affects the aerobic engine, the ability to use oxygen. Remember, the other units are on a per kilogram body weight basis. So if I gave you a drug that made your weight go down, it would have no effect on your VO2 max in these units of liters per minute, but it would affect your value in mLs per kg per minute. But if you're wanting to see if the drug affects the ability to use oxygen, you want to use these units, liters per minute. All right, now for the next set of units, mLs per kg per minute. And again, men's values tend to be higher than women's, but the difference is less than we saw in the absolute units because we have taken size out of the equation. When is it important to evaluate a person's fitness in terms of mLs per kg per minute, their relative VO2 max? When the job is to move your own body weight. This is true in running, it's true in court sports, it's true in mountain climbing, and arguably it's almost true in cycling in the mountains. Because when you cycle in the mountains, you're going slower, so air resistance is less of a factor, but gravity, as you try to go up a 5 or 11 or 20% slope in the Tour de France, gravity becomes the issue and your body weight is the resistance you're trying to overcome. So I said with the previous units, liters per minute, your time trial cyclists are the big guys, the big circus bears on the little bicycles. In the mountains, it's the wiry little guys who pound for pound have got an engine that's very functional. They would have a high VO2 max in terms of mLs per kg per minute. So any sport or recreational activity that involves supporting your own body weight, these are the units that are important. So the second time or kind of situation in which we use these units is in the fitness business. Why do people work out? 2 reasons. Lose weight and get in shape. Look at the top of this picture. If you get in shape, your aerobic engine will work better. That mLs per minute, the size of your aerobic engine, will be greater. Your VO2 max and mLs per kg per minute, or mLs per minute per kg, will be greater. In addition, if you lose weight and the number of kilograms goes down, then the value for mLs per kg per minute will go up. So these are good units to use if you're describing somebody's general fitness. Now, this is a slide that if you're interested in mathematics, you really want to pay attention. This is for graduate students, and this is for people with, or people who are interested in cycling. Sometimes we express VO2 max in mLs per minute per kilogram raised to some exponent. Now, when we say mLs per kg per minute, that kg on the previous slide really is raised to a power. It's -1. And when you say mLs per minute or liters per minute, then you really are saying mLs per kg raised to the 0 per minute. So, if you will, both of the previous units included kgs raised to some power, although in those cases it was either 0, where weight doesn't matter, isn't taken into consideration, or 1, where it was a pound for pound, every kilogram of mass was taken into consideration. Now, when you use something like 0.67, for starters, it affects the values. It gives you almost what you might almost call theoretical values, 354 versus 264. It depends upon what the exponent is. You can see that just as this exponent lies between 0 and 1, so this percent difference between men and women lies between the percent differences that we have discussed before. What explains this difference? The relative muscle mass, hemoglobin concentration, but size also plays something of a role, just not as much of a role as it did when the exponent was 0 and the units were effectively liters per minute. Okay. Why would you express values this way? The best example, and certainly the one that's had the most research done, is cycling, where, as I just mentioned, the resistance that's overcome is related to your frontal area. Your frontal area is related to your mass, but not directly. In fact, it's more related to mass to the 2/3. Swimming, again, you're not supporting your body weight. It's the resistance through the water that you're having to overcome, but that resistance is related to your body surface area, which is related but not directly to your mass. So what folks have tried to do is determine what the correct exponent is to describe the demands of any activity that's not directly related to your body weight. And we also refer to this as scaling when people try to scale activities to your body weight to equate the demands on men and women. And the military has been trying to do this by saying, you know, how many push-ups, how many sit-ups and such for those branches of the military. They keep changing their fitness requirements. But there's been this thought of maybe we can equate the demands and equate the exercises by taking into consideration body weight raised to some exponent. Well, this is a bit vague. It's used almost more in research than actually in sport. But if the researchers can figure it out, the sport scientists will certainly want to use it. Well, that was just a quick look at our choice of units in expressing VO2 max. We can have the absolute liters per minute, how big is your aerobic engine, and we can have relative units that are relative to body mass or fat-free mass or mass raised to some exponent. You should know the role that size and fatness and hemoglobin may play in each variable or for each unit. And you should know when and why we choose to use any particular unit when we're reporting VO2 max or using it. I told you it was a short one. Cheers.